This vignette is part one of the funeral procession from the Papyrus of Ani. This lower border up here represents the knowledge of the people, the animals, the flowers, the mourners, and what they're doing. This top border up here represents the knowledge of its symbolic meaning. I'm going to explain the symbolic meaning. I'm going to start at the rear and go forward. Now, there's two men standing here, and their arms are raised like this, and that's a very common hieroglyph. It means referring to something, or it could mean the fourth and fifth power of mind. Now there's two men standing here, and they were referring to understanding the law, human and divine, help you to take the right step going forward. Now on this ledge is a chest of the knowledge of the law of genetics, human and divine. Now some say that this hieroglyph right here is the belt, or I mean the buckle or knot of Isis, and that's not correct. You see, here's the symbol of Isis, and she's wearing this belt buckle right here. It represents the two powers of her body, way, spirit, and also Nephthys here is also wearing that belt buckle, and the ram god Kunam. But you can see here, it is similar, but it's not the same. What it means, well, this is the correct hieroglyph here. It's the penis entering the vagina, meaning the impregnation of life. Now the loop in Egyptian hieroglyphics always means life, and I'll give you some common examples. The two powers of life, the two powers of a triple change of life, the lower and higher power of life, the power of life of your blood, your tri-power of life, Father, Mother, Son, and the point of blood and life. Now in Egyptian hieroglyphics, when this is turned around, it means the two powers of blood sometimes, because blood was a symbol of life. So when you turn this around, they both mean the same, the power of life and the power of your blood. Now, where do we get your? Oh, excuse me, my pencil fell. Give me a pencil over there. That's good. Rolled off the back there. In the letter U in the English language, in Egyptian hieroglyphics, when you turn it around, it means you or your two powers of life, or the two powers of you. Now, this hieroglyph here is repeated 3 times. So when you put it together with this, it means the knowledge of the law of the impregnation of life, male and female. Now, the second glyph right here, some say is the pillar of the pillar of Osiris. Now, I can understand why some might think this is part of the backbone, the sacrum, and the vertebrae, but that's not what it means. The triangle in Egyptian hieroglyphics means the spirit. Different triangles mean different spirits. For example, this is the basic sign of the Spirit. Here, this triangle. This is a right angle triangle, represents the right spirit. Now when you see this sign here, it's small and it's slanted, that means the bias spirit. Here you have a right angle representing the principal power of a right spirit, and here you have a slanted triangle, the principal power of a bias spirit. Now, you see here, you have the line is curved inward. So that means the inner spirit. Now there's many modifications of this. This is the basic one. You see the lines are curved in, the inner spirit. Mine over the inner spirit. You see the U symbol, the T symbol, the truth of your inner spirit. Now this here has 4 bars at the top, so this means 4 powers over the inner spirit. And it's repeated here twice. So the 4 powers of the inner spirit, male and female. Now this lower rectangle here represents the knowledge of the law of human genetics. And this upper rectangle represents the knowledge of the law of divine genetics. It has the same hieroglyphs. Now on the top here sits Anubis. He's a jackal. He can hear and sense things that humans can't. Now when you're practicing human genetics, you get proof in the physical world. That's called phenomenon. When you're practicing divine genetics, you don't get proof in the physical world. You get proof within your mind and your body. Now you being Anubis, you can sense and hear that occurring. Now on the side here is a papyrus and a lotus flower. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, the lotus represents the power of the spirit, and the papyrus, the power of your mind. Now, this represents, this knowledge of the law of human and divine genetics here is the power of your mind and the power of your spirit. Now, next are 4 men holding this rope. And you notice here there is a right angle. The right angle in Egyptian hieroglyphics means the law, because what is right is the law. When you're doing something or building something, you have to do it right. That's the law. But they are holding this rope here with 4 arms here and 4 arms here, representing grasping the 4 plus 4 parts of the law. Now what are they? The square is also a symbol of the law because it's right on all 4 sides, or 4 square. When it's crossed by 2 diagonal lines, it divides the law up into 4 quarters. Now these 4 quarters are also a sign of a right spirit. So this sign means the 4 right spirits of the law and the 4 quarters of the law. Now, you can see here the waist spirit at the top is a right triangle. So they're grasping here 4 right spirits of the law. What are they? Well, you can say yes or no to human genetics, and you can say yes or no to divine genetics, and those are 4 right spirits. But you notice here that the bottom of the skirt here is also a right triangle. So now they're grasping over here the 4 quarters of the law. Understanding the four bright spirits and the four quarters of the law helps you to take the right step going forward. Now I'm going to go up here to these hieroglyphics on the top. This man in the back is the hieroglypher. And he's referring with his left hand to these hieroglyphics and his right hand to these hieroglyphics. Now I know they're not clear in the video, so I have redrawn them and enlarged them. You can see the arm here is referring to this palette used by the hieroglypher. And these here represent his reed pens and brushes. And on this string here, he's carrying a case of cakes of dye. Now that's the lower meaning. The higher meaning is the hieroglypher used the fourth and fifth power of mind, that's human and divine, and the principle or power of the human spirit and the divine higher spirit to write and paint these hieroglyphics on this vignette or papyrus. Now, these are sacred pictorial symbols, not secular. Understanding this helps you to take the right step going forward. Now this next man is carrying a chair. How do I know that? Well, it's fairly common. You can see this man right here is sitting in this chair. You have to understand the law, the four quarters here, to play this game of genetics called draughts. If one quarter is missing, you can't succeed. This man here is representing the four quarters of the law. It's telling us what it is. He's referring to one quarter here with his right hand, the right and by a spirit of mind. And his left arm here is referring to one quarter of the law, doing the right thing. And his two legs here represent two quarters of the law. Now his loincloth here is the right triangle. You have to have a virile body, way, spirit. That's one quarter of the law. Now you see up here, this sign right here represents an erection. You can see it here, here, and here. So one quarter of the law is that you have to desire to practice genetics or you won't think and do the right thing. So understanding the four quarters of the law helps you to take the right step going forward. Now this next man has a sign over his head. What is it? Well, it's this sign. You can see here that this curved down is curved up here, and there's a loop here. And there's two black signs hanging down here. You see the triangle and the loop means the spirit of life. Now this has a bar here. The power of the spirit of life. This has the T, the loop, and the triangle, the truth of the spirit of life. But these two black signs here represent the lower human power of life and the higher divine power of life. And he is referring to these lower and higher powers of life referring to your mind and body, refer to this next man. Understanding this helps you to take the right step going forward. Now, did I say that right? Now, this next man is referring with his left hand to these two hieroglyphics here. And because they're probably not clear in the video, I have redrawn them. There's two of them. Now a rectangle here in Egyptian hieroglyphics means knowledge. This vignette is a rectangle. It means the knowledge of these hieroglyphics. Now the disc And Egyptian hieroglyphics means the sun, and it's not a complete disk, it's a disk that's rising. So we have here the knowledge of the truth of the birth of the sun. But there's two. So this vignette or papyrus contains the knowledge of the truth of the birth of the sun, human and divine. Your two powers of life, of your mind and body. Understanding this, now just a minute, with his right hand, he is holding a stick here, referring to the principle of genetics of his body, way, spirit here, controlled by his mind and five senses. Now, understanding this helps you to take the right step going forward. Now, next, we have 8 male mourners, close friends and relatives of the man who has deceased. Well, that's the lower meaning. Now, the symbolic meaning. This man's feet is pointing in that direction, but he's turned around backwards, and he is referring to seeing and understanding these hieroglyphics here helps him to take the right step going forward. Now, next there are 2 men standing here side by side. He is referring to a right and biased spirit of mind, carnal, and a right and biased spirit of mind, divine, are different. Understanding this helps you to take the right step going forward. Now you can see this man in the back here. He is referring to this next group of men. There's 3 here, because we're going in this direction. You see here, these 2 men are facing opposite. And this man here is referring to understanding the birth, death, and rebirth of man helps you to take the right step going forward. Now this man in the back here is referring to the next 2 men, because of course we're going in that direction. This first man here, look, he has white hair, and there's some black signs here. He's missing a hand. Well, he's referring to understanding man eventually dies of old age, or diseases, or accidents. That's inevitable. Understanding this helps you to take the right step going forward. Now this next man here is referring to understanding that after death man is born again. Understanding that helps you to take the right step going forward. Now this sledge here, carrying this coffin to the tomb for burial, represents the knowledge of the principles of death and the knowledge of the principles of birth. Now, in Egyptian hieroglyphics, the line means a principle. For example, take the principle of law of gravity. See, here's why I needed my pen. If I let go of this, and it falls to the ground, that is confirmation of the principle of gravity. Where's my next one here? Oh. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, when a principle is confirmed, it's a symbol for the truth of life, or the confirmation of the principle of life, the truth of the heart, the double truth of your egg or genetic potential. But this line here has 4 crosses, representing man should understand these 4 truths and these other truths of mummification. Now, excuse me, up here there's 2 rows of short lines, and it's a black row representing the knowledge that some things, many things said about the Egyptian doctrine of death and the afterlife are not correct. I'm going to read you something here from the Canadian Museum of Library here, their website. It says the mysteries of Egypt, the Egyptian civilization, religion, life after death. Now there's a funeral procession right here, a picture of it right here, and it says, when they died, they were mummified. So the soul would return to the body, giving it breath and life, that is, in the afterworld. Now that's not true. What the Egyptians did with the corpse is remove the internal organs, sun-dry the body, wrap it in a linen cloth, and coat it with resin to prevent putrefaction, the same reason that we practice embalming today. So the first truth here of death, the physical body dies, that's forever, there is no resuscitation. Now that's true, male and female. Now the lady kneeling here represents the soul of man does not die. That's the second truth of death. That's true, male and female. She's referring here to her mind and to her body. Her skirt here represents her body. Now you see this line under her eye here? That represents tears. Because when she lost her physical body, or her physical body died, she lost consciousness of the physical world. But this inner eye of her mind represents a principle of the one principle of the sun, the consciousness of being in the underworld. Now, this upper rectangle here represents the knowledge of the 4 principles of death, and these other principles here of mummification, and what is not true about the Egyptian doctrine of death and the afterworld. Now this lower rectangle with these different colored layers represents the knowledge of the underworld. The Egyptian term for that is the duad, or amente. Now the Greek term is Hades. In the Old Testament is called Sheol, or the realm of the dead. In the New Testament, Hades is translated hell, which is not a good translation, because hell is only one division of the other underworld. There are others. Purgatory, memory recall, and lamentations. At the top, you have paradise, contentment and tranquility if you've led a good life. Now this dark zone here represents also one division of the underworld, unconsciousness, or a sleep-like state. Now, these vertical lines dividing this up here represents the knowledge that most religions of the world in mythologies have an underworld with a different name. It's an intermediary period between death and rebirth. Now she's referring here to her right hand to this red zone here, not only to a skirt, but to this red zone. Meaning that some humans desire to be born again on earth, and maybe others don't. And you see this sign behind her head here? These are the 2 powers of life of her mind and spirit. Now, where is the doctrine here of rebirth? Well, this vertical column here represents the knowledge that the human spirit of the underworld is resurrected here and is born again. Now this row of this here represents the rebirth of the Son of Man. It rises into life, then falls, and over here it dies again and returns to the underworld. Now how does that occur? How does that take place? Well, this bouquet here of lotuses and papyruses represents the principle of unfolding the Father, Mother, Spirit here. And these groups of stems here represent other principles other than the three. At the bottom are the four essential elements. 5, the 5 senses which guides this process. 6 involves sex genetics. 7, the 7th sense, your conscience, which tells you what's right and wrong. 8, the 8 powers or principles of genetics. And 9, time is required for the birth of the Son, and these other principles of the birth of the Son. Now, Nephthys is standing here, representing the human mother principle. Isis is standing here, representing the divine mother principle. And this bouquet of flowers here represents the principle of unfolding the divine Mother, Father, Son, Spirit. That resurrects the Son from the underworld. And here it is born again. It rises to life, then falls, and dies again the same as man. Now this line, with all these crosses here, represents the truth of the Son from death, from birth to death. Now, see, there's 2 oars here that act as rudders, representing this knowledge of the principles of death and the principles or truths of birth, and trigenetics human and trigenetics divine, guide your spirit of mind. And this bottom runner here represents the principle of lifting up your spirit of mind, this knowledge. Now I'm going to go next to this priest here. He's a teacher of the law, human and divine. And he's burning incense here. Now it's not visible in this vignette, but I've seen the digital image, and there's a receptacle in his hand, and you can see the fumes rising. Anyhow, burning incense represents the desire of the spirit of mind. And there's a second hieroglyph here, and it's this one. This here is a vase, sometimes used for burning incense, and it means a set spirit. When you're practicing genetics, you have to have a set spirit. You can't keep changing your mind. Now this censer here is an arm with a hand. So a desire and a set spirit is the principle or power of your mind. To do what? To do the right thing. He's holding a vase here, or a pitcher in his right hand, and he's pouring out water, representing the appropriation of your body's vital force. Now, these papyruses or lotuses here are aquatic plants. They require water to grow and blossom. Now this is true over here also when you're practicing divine genetics. Now, he's also wearing here a leopard skin, which means, grasp, you must put to death this spirit of man that satisfies his desires by these acts of violence. Now look here. See this sign here? You also must have a right and a bias spirit your mind and senses has to control your body, way, spirit here. Understanding the law, human and divine, helps you to practice these principles or this law of genetics. Now, human or divine. Now I'm going to go forward here to these four men here. And they have a different meaning than the four men here at the back. They're grasping this rope here with forearms here and forearms here, representing grasping the four right spirits and the four quarters of the law, and also, am I in focus over here? The four principles here, the fifth and the sixth principles of genetics, of father, mother, physical, genetics. Now what are they? Well, these horns up here represents your two powers of will are controlled by your mind and five senses. They control the first two principles of genetics, what you think and do. Now your subconscious mind here controls two principles of genetics. For example, the subconscious mind produces the sperm of the bull, and the subconscious mind produces the egg of the cow. But if you think and do the right thing here, the subconscious mind automatically responds, conception takes place, and the fertilized egg in the womb develops. But these black spots here represent, even if you think and do the right thing, you may not, the conception of life may not take place. Now why is that? Because the bull may be not fertile and the cow may not be fertile. Or you may be too young or too old to practice genetics, or you may be doing the wrong thinking and doing the wrong things. Now these black spots up here also appear on this cow. What applies to human genetics applies to divine genetics. This is the higher principle. Now the bull here has two colors. The lower meaning, yes, it is a bull, but it has this second color here represented, has a simple symbolic meaning of the four, fifth, and sixth principles of divine physical genetics, of the father and of the mother. Now, you see this piece of the skirt here in front? It has these bar signs down here, or fringe, representing the genetic powers of your body, way, spirit here, represented by these oxen. Now, there's one symbol here that I haven't explained. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, the wind or air was a symbol for the spirit. Now we have a flag here, or a triangular flag here attached to the bow of the boat, and there's also one here attached to the stern. And these bars right here represent different powers of the spirit. Now if you hear your desire here, and desire is one of those powers. If it's too weak, the boat doesn't move. Now if it's too strong, also that could be a problem. Your spirit here could become unhinged, or irrational, or furious, or negative, because you're not getting the results you desire. You have to maintain a right, irrational spirit of mind. Now, also, you cannot desire to practice human genetics and divine genetics at the same time, because you're going to have conflict of mind. The wind is blowing in two opposite directions. So if you want to practice human genetics, you have to be positive here and negative here. And if you want to practice divine genetics, you have to be positive here and negative here, so you'll cancel out headwinds. Now when you're practicing human and divine genetics here, you have to have a bias and a right spirit of mind so you sail in one direction. Now, this sign right here represents, if you're successful at practicing divine genetics involving these principles, the higher spirit of mind, or divine, will speak to your spirit of mind. Now, this vignette is an enlargement of a JPG digital image, and it came out kind of blurred. So if you want to look at a more detailed image, go to the internet and do a research for the funeral procession of the Papyrus of Ani. Now, I've explained part 1 of this funeral procession from beginning to end. So for today, did you enlarge that to get that whole? For today, I'm finished.